Okay, so we were talking about tolerance. So, tolerance is the capacity to understand and accept how others are different than you. So, we're not just noticing them now, we're actually tolerating them, we're accepting them. Um, a child who's had a difficult upbringing, you might see them intolerant to others, likelier to lash out, tease, bully, let them know they're wrong. Um, a lot of times, again, we're going to see that come out in behaviors, sometimes violent behaviors of intolerance. So then from there, we move on to respect. That is appreciating the worth in yourself and in others. So now we're not just noticing we're not just being a part of a group, we're not just noticing differences, we're not just accepting differences, we're not just tolerating differences, we respect the differences. We see them as part of a bigger picture. We see where we lack and others have, and how that benefits us and society around us. So that's the type of respect that we're talking about here. A child that struggles with this, you might see that they can't respect other kids, or they struggle with respect of authority or adults. You'll probably get some behaviors from this as well, since they can't navigate that whole respect of others. They probably didn't get to tolerance of others, and so that would be very, very hard for a child that's coming from a hard place here. They also might be pretty harsh on themselves as well, be their own critic, and bring themselves down because they can't respect themselves. So all of this is in regards to what we just talked about with the physical, the cognitive, the emotional, the spiritual, and the moral development of the human. So with these 6 core strengths, we can't quite develop these in line with those 5 basic human developments. So we're going to see those differing, that we talked about, those differing development rates there, because the brain's not developing in a systematic form in a nurturing environment where it's fed what it needs to build those connections in the brain. So we're going to talk now. I've talked a lot about Dr. Bruce Perry and a lot of what he brings to our understanding of the child's developing brain and the developing brain of a child who has experienced trauma. So I'd like to talk with you a second about a little bit older of a, if I can get my computer to work here, older of a thought process here in the developing brain of humans. I'm going to talk about, probably a lot of you have heard about Erikson's stages of development. So for the sake of this, we're just going to kind of talk about the early childhood ones and not quite go extensively into the older ones. But here we're looking at infants who are obviously dependent on their caregiver. So we're building in infancy, we're building this basic trust versus mistrust. So when I cry, am I going to get fed? Am I going to get picked up? Am I going to have my needs met by my caregiver? All of those would build trust. If an infant's needs are not tended to, not cared for, not dealt with in a gentle way, in a loving way, in a nurturing way, then that infant the brain won't quite develop, as Dr. Bruce Perry was saying, won't quite develop the way it's supposed to, and a child may develop some mistrust issues as they continue to grow. Early childhood. So Erikson here is talking about 1 to 3 year old. We're working with autonomy versus shame. Here, children are being taught that they are important when they're given choices that would promote their own self-will. So a lot of times we talk about when we're parenting that, give a child choices that they can have. So if a child always wants soda for supper and we say to them, you know what, you can have milk, water, or juice. What do you think? Which one do you want? And you get really excited about having them make that choice where one of them is not soda and they get to choose, and then they get to feel proud of themselves. Here we're building that autonomy, that ability to do well for themselves and to feel good about themselves. If we continue to say no and shame and yell at them, tell them they're not good at things, why can't you be better at that? What's wrong with you? Communicating these messages that tell the child that they're not good at what they're doing, at living life, then they're going to develop that shame. Then children move into what Erikson calls the play age, the 3 to 6 year old age. This is this is where the child's play expands and it grows. They kind of start, instead of side-by-side play, they start to play with each other, and they start to kind of understand that there's other humans around them, and they also have needs, and kind of what that looks like and how they might fit in, and they're kind of starting to develop that. Children at this age should be encouraged to use their imagination, to be a leader in play. So you sit down with a child and say, what do you want to do today? What do you want to play? And you really engage them in whatever they can come up with. Obviously, that's safe and good. And that would promote their purpose in life. That would give them that sense of accomplishment in their abilities. And then again, if we are too high demanding, coming down on a child, hurting them through physical punishment, they're going to develop guilt, and they would suffer in that they wouldn't quite develop their own sense of purpose at that age, and their purpose in their abilities and purpose in their life. And then from there we go into the school age. So this is the age where they're being educated. They learn to read and write. Their comprehensive is improving. They're mastering some of their skills, motor skills, fine motor skills, emotional skills, some competence in what they're doing. And if the child is not taught some of these foundational skills or receiving an adequate education, or understanding of emotional control in the family system or in social environments, then they might feel inferior as they grow into adulthood and might not have that confidence that goes along with it. So those are kind of some of the earlier stages that we're talking about in developing children. So we're going to kind of go all the way back to when baby's in utero, when mama's pregnant, and some risks to this type of brain development while she's still pregnant. Those might be alcohol, drugs, tobacco, and environmental toxins, inadequate nutrition on the pregnant mother's part, some prenatal stress, stressful situations that she experiences, release a hormone that also goes through the baby's system, and they experience that stress as well on a chemical level. And then just kind of a difficult pregnancy. If there's any issues or high risk that kind of goes along with that can also play a role in the brain development of the child. Postnatal, some of these we understand to be a difficult birth, so some oxygen deprivation, a traumatic birth. Other parts might be abuse and neglect towards the child, floating through the foster care system, and then family separations as well. So those we kind of understand as impeding on brain development. So let's move into attachment. I really like this quote from Dr. Karen Purvis, which says, "You cannot lead a child to a place of healing if you do not know the way yourself." So we're going to talk a little bit about our own attachment, what our childhoods were like, what our attachment to our caregiver, whoever that might have been, some of the trauma that may have happened to us as children or in utero with our mom, our birth mom. And when we start to understand how we have dealt with, coped with, worked through some of our childhood issues with attachment, then we can, then from a place of healing, work with a child that may be coming from a hard place as well. So, what is attachment? What am I talking about when I'm talking about attachment? Well, attachment is that emotional bond with a caregiver. It's that feeling between a child and a parent of being irreplaceable. You're developing an emotional bond that is strong and healthy, where needs are met and reciprocated on both ends, usually between the child and the caregiver. Attachment explained by the experts. So, there are 4 main attachment types that have been explored and developed through evidence-based research. The first is secure attachment, and that's really what we are all looking to achieve. Ambivalent attachment, avoidant attachment, and disorganized attachment are where there might have been some interruptions or issues or some type of trauma that caused these to come about into adulthood for us. Normally here I would show this TBRI attachment YouTube video. I can't do that while I'm sharing the screen in the way that I'm doing it, so I want to encourage you. Maybe we could send out a link so that you could see it. It's on YouTube. If you just go to YouTube and search for the TBRI attachment video, just kind of walks you through these 4 types of attachment styles. So because we're not going to show the video here, I'm just going to run through them real quick just to get a basic understanding of what they look like. Secure attachment, like I said, that's the one that we are attempting to accomplish, all of us, not just with our own children, but with our own caretakers as well. That is, when a child is able to look for their caregiver in times of stress, uncertainty, fear, sadness. When an infant cries, they're picked up. When they cry, they're fed or comforted or held or nurtured in some way or another, and this develops that secure attachment. Ambivalent attachment style is characterized by a child that may go to their parent in times of stress, but might not be calmed by their parent in the times of stress. So the care of this child received was probably inconsistent, varying from sensitive to neglectful. So the parent was either very sensitive to their needs or at other times neglectful of their needs. Avoidant attachment is shown in a child that does not seek comfort in times of stress. They may on the outside appear very calm, where internally they are not. They are sometimes referred to as like a pseudo-dependent. Disorganized attachment style can be confusing. So this is when a child displays characteristics of maybe all the categories, some of the categories, different categories at different times. They'll want to hug and then they'll throw a tantrum. They want to be close, but then they want to be far away. And typically this type of attachment comes about because the child, their caregiver, their main caregiver was their source of fear. So they were abused in some way or another by their caregiver, and which caused stress. So that's kind of the basics of these attachment characteristics. And again, I want you to really start to think about yourself. Where do you fit in these? Do you see yourself in any of these? And I want to encourage you, there is a place that you can go online, and I think we could send out this link as well, to Dr. Bruce Perry, the Child Trauma Academy. They developed a neurosequential model of therapeutics, and this is where you can take a little quiz and find out what your attachment style might be. And I really encourage you to do that, to understand more about yourself so that we can go into a place of healing and we can help children heal through theirs.